No, let me go back and restate what I said, and I'll answer your question accordingly, if that's okay.
Sure.
What I said is if they are selling marijuana, their goal is to get someone addicted to some substance. So they're lacing the marijuana, and they're either lacing the marijuana with drugs, or, and this is the part that I think we got confused on, or let's just say I'm trying to get you addicted to something, Representative Hanley, other than politics.
I'm already addicted, thank you. And I'm paying for it.
I see Mr. Cousins, maybe he can help you with removing your substance abuse. If I'm trying to get you addicted, I'm going to do one of two things. I'm going to lace your marijuana with something, because what that means when you're addicted, with marijuana, you can come and go, you can go to anybody. When you're addicted, you'll do anything to come back to get the drug from me. So, on the one hand, I'll either lace the marijuana with something, or I will give you free addictive drugs to start you off on, to get you addicted. Things like, if you're already my customer, I'm going to try to upsell you, as they say in sales. You know what, why don't you try this, this little thing, it's on the house. Well, what they're not saying is that that little thing happens to be very addictive. You know that whole idea of not getting a free lunch? Well, you don't really get free drugs, because by the time you're done getting those free drugs, you've become addicted, and now I own you. So to your question about how do I get this out of, why would legalizing it make a difference in terms of those drug dealers? The state would license 300 commercial, I believe it's 300 commercial licenses in the state. You would have to be licensed in order to sell this product commercially. You would be required to ID someone. We would have control over quality of product. We'd know it wasn't laced. We'd know who was selling it. When Prohibition ended, when we repealed that constitutional amendment, people like Al Capone were out of business. Why would I go to Representative Haskell, who's selling it on the black market, and risk prosecution because I bought it on the black market, when I could go to Representative Hanley, who's selling it legally, who has oversight, who is subject to the same types of searches and reviews that any law-abiding business owner who sells alcohol and tobacco is. That's why we're going to dry up the market. That's my goal. I don't want this in the hands of drug dealers.
Okay, let me move on to something
Yeah.
else. I forgot what you said, the amount of revenue that you thought this would generate.
Yes.
Tax revenue.
Yep.
We're talking a lot of money in marijuana. And I know a little bit about this type of activity.
Well, I can't speak to that, my friend.
If you have a product out there, marijuana growing, being distributed legally, you think for a second that organized crime, cartels, anyone else is not going to take and say, I'm taking this county over. You're going to do business with me, or else. I mean, wherever there's drugs, there's other crimes.
Well, let me ask you.
Why would it not happen with this?
Well, with all due respect, Representative Hanley, when I sell alcohol up on the Hill, I don't have Al Capone walking in asking me.
But they don't produce alcohol anywhere.
We have a three-tiered system. We have a system in place that regulates where that product came from.
I know, but what I'm getting at, you can grow marijuana almost anywhere in Maine. You can't make whiskey. I would guess it's relatively complicated.
It's too bad because Jack Daniels is very nice.
It's the price.
That
would be one of my concerns, is I can see people start operating protection rackets.
I would say that you're comparing this system to perfection. We do that a lot in the legislature. And this system,
compare it to what?
to perfection, to utopia. In a utopian world, no one would want to consume it. So there'd be no market. The reality is that people do want to consume it, and they are consuming it. And there is an off-the-books system already in place that is providing that product to its consumers. That off-the-books market is already under cartels. When you look at what's happening in Guatemala and Mexico, and I have folks who are going to speak to that in just a few minutes, those cartels already exist. When you look at what's happening in Portland, We have gang violence in Portland. You heard from Chief Craig just a few weeks ago. I was here. What you're suggesting is already happening. I am trying to stop it.
You don't think this would enhance and create opportunities for gangs?
We already have them, Representative.
I know you already have them, but you think that this would not increase their activities as far as protection, distribution, protection, whatever?
I believe that history should be reviewed and considered when we're making decisions. I do not believe, and you're free to disagree with me.
I do.
You can, but I do not believe for 1 second that this is going to enhance that. I think it's going to dry it up. And I think the data supports that. When you start looking, look back on the last pages. Started tanking, as at page 7 in the yellow, the very end. Our murder clearance rates started tanking. In 1965, they were over 90%. And now, we're just over 65%. We have, on page 11, incarcerated. You can see in the graph, the incarceration rates. Look at the United States, which is third down. It goes literally off the charts. And we still have cartels. We still have a gun trade. You know, I'm a left-wing liberal, and I love the Second Amendment. But I think the big issue that we have between liberals and conservatives is that liberals are concerned about guns getting in the hands of criminals. If we were to stop the drug trade, by and large, we're going to stop the gun trade, and maybe we can stop fighting about the Second Amendment.
Don't count on that. I wish we could, but don't count on that. Thank you for your answers.
For those who are attending a legislative hearing for the first time, you will note that when you decide to step up to the microphone to testify, you're also agreeing to be questioned by members of the committee, and they are required to be questions, and you may see some of us stretch a little to turn that into a question. I would also say it is my understanding that Representative Russell has agreed to be here for the work session.
Yes.
And if anyone desires to hear more from Representative Russell at that time, all you have to do is merely request, and we will do that. At this point, are there other questions for the representative? Representative LaJoy.
I may have a request for the committee, and that is for a glass of water. My mouth is going dry with all these questions. I hope I'm answering them reasonably.
We'll sell
thank you.
We'll sell it to you in a bag of rice.
It better not be a fine bag rate.
You put a lot of work into it. I appreciate all the work that you put into it and everything. I do have a question for you. By legalizing the marijuana, are we going to put more marijuana out into the market or less? That's number one. You can answer that one.
Marijuana is currently considered, well, as of 2007, I think, marijuana was considered Maine's #1 cash crop. It beat out the spud. The spud is a respectable plant. We sell a lot of it. And marijuana beat out the spud. It is my understanding it beat out the blueberry, too. We've had a huge debate about the blueberry. Beat out the blueberry. Recently, it's come to my attention that it seems to have dropped a little bit to maybe second or third place. But as it currently stands, it is our #1 cash crop, which means that it is being grown in places that we can't even imagine. I remember my mom, I always bring up my parents, and I apologize. We were discussing this bill, and my mother was like, "Oh yeah, landowners, man. You own land and you're not on it. You know, someone could be growing on your land." And she stopped and she turned bright white and she looked at my dad and she goes, "You know that land your mother left you? We haven't been there for 10 years. So I'm thinking that now that the mud season has cleared, there's probably been a trip up to make sure there's no marijuana growing on their land. Landowners are held accountable right now if marijuana is found to be on their land. There's a good lobbyist that has a great story about discovering one. I'll tell you off the record who that is. But it's already pretty ubiquitous. I mean, one of the other questions that my dad asked, "Geez, Diane, that mean those gosh darn helicopters are going to stop coming through?" Every fall. I was like, Dad, are you serious? He's like, yeah, every fall. The helicopters start coming through, checking in to see if you're growing. It's already everywhere. If we were to actually license who is able to who is able to grow it, we would be earning revenue off of the sales and income tax that would allow us to thoroughly prosecute those who are not allowed to be growing it for commercial use.
So,
But I think it would actually limit.
Are you saying yes, it would increase it, or no, it would not increase it?
It would not. And I'll tell you, I've talked to some, at least one person who's off the record, who's off the
I
books.
guess the reason I'm asking you is the ones that don't use it now because it's illegal. However, would probably use it if it's not illegal. Then wouldn't we be increasing the numbers of users?
Potentially, but a lot of our marijuana it's an export. We would actually, I mean, if you consider the tourism industry that would boom, potentially it would increase. But again, we are limiting it to 300 licenses, 2,000 square feet you can grow and store. So there's only so much space in this state where you would be legally allowed to grow it for commercial purposes.
So then you'd probably go to non-licensed growers to buy it.
Potentially, but I have to say,
I'm just talking out loud.
yeah, no, it's a fair question, but I've talked to at least one off the books person, and he's begging. He's like, I really want this to be on the books. I'm not afraid of DEA. I'm afraid of the IRS.
So I guess my other question would be this: by taking the prohibition off marijuana, like we did on alcohol, aren't we taking over what the gangs are doing today by making it legal and utilizing the monies for our general fund?
Actually, I specifically allocated the revenue to under special revenue, but the committee is welcome to determine where it goes. We already do what you're suggesting with alcohol.
I realize that, and I realize, what we've done over the years, and that basically we are paying for that through, we'll say, accidents and or what have you because of the use of alcohol and drugs. Using marijuana and legalizing it, having it out there, we probably turn into the same circumstances, and we may increase the amount of individuals driving impaired, possibly. I'm not sure. Those are just questions going through my mind.
No, those are very good questions, Representative. And I would say that people who tend to consume marijuana don't tend to want to go very far, unlike alcohol. People go to destinations, to bars, to have alcohol, and I don't mean to make light of it, but it goes back to the piece that I mentioned where the chief of police was talking about how people who are stoned don't necessarily give him problems. They tend to be a little more mellow, don't tend to really attack people. Biggest thing I've ever seen someone stoned attack is pizza box or bag of chips.
Senator Jazowski, then Representative Burns.
Thank you. Some of these questions just lead to others. I asked you earlier if you knew when we decriminalized possession of small amounts of civil crime, and you didn't. And people here that will. Mm-hmm. I'm going to ask you another question that you might not have the answer to, but you might.
I can find a reason to
The last time this body increased that amount that you could have and not be criminalized, do you remember when that might have been?
I don't know the answer to that either.
You voted for it last year.
Oh, well, it was for the medical marijuana dispensaries.
No.
I did?
We enhanced, we increased the amount of marijuana a person can have as a civil crime.
Oh, yes.
In this committee from 1.25 ounces to 2.5 last year. I have a question there because that was a question you know when, and I answered it for you. And now number 2 is going to be, can you possibly imagine any place in Maine where a person couldn't score some marijuana on a good or a bad day?